My name is Mary Gagler. I'm the director of Amos Eno Gallery, and I'm here today with Rosemary Meza-DesPlas. So I'm excited to be here to interview and find out more about your artist studio practice. Just a little bit of an intro. You joined the gallery in 2017, I believe.
Yes.
And your first solo show with us was Jane Anger in February 2019. So that was it was such an incredible show with featuring some of your spoken word performance art. And yeah, so I'm excited to find out more about what's going on in your studio.
Okay.
So can you tell us a little bit about where you are?
Yes. Can you hear me good?
Audio is great.
Yeah. Okay. So I live in Farmington, New Mexico, and it's the northwest corner of the state of New Mexico. So a little bit of a sparser area. And I've lived here since 2016. I'm originally from Texas, and we're in my studio right now. I am primarily known for hand-sewn hair drawings, watercolors, and large drawing installations. But as Mary mentioned, I also do spoken word performances. And when I do my performances, I create my own costumes and memorize my poetry and try to create a mood with it, sometimes using props.
Great. Yeah, so those props, will we see any of those in your studio today?
Actually, there's a weird little head that's right back there that's kind of dangling. That was a rejected prop. I was going to use it, and then I didn't. Here, I'll show you, since it's not very far, I'll show you this one. These are kind of experiments that just ended up sitting in the studio. So they didn't go anywhere, but this was my idea of a doll. And there's a French word right here, which means mean, M-E-A-N, like a mean girl. So anyway, a rejected prop from spoken word.
Yeah, it seems that's sort of the kind of thing that makes the artist studio visits so unique. It's the things that don't get shown, the things that are still sources of inspiration, but for whatever reason were rejected.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see, that vinyl. I haven't really seen vinyl in your work. That clear plastic.
I did an entire series using vinyl material that they use for shower curtains, the clear, and it's kind of thicker. It was kind of the thickest shower curtain vinyl I could find. And I tried sewing into it with a sewing machine. I tried gluing things onto it. So I did a lot of experimentation. I only showed them, I think I showed them once. This is not on vinyl, but it's from that time period. So it's watercolor paper, but I was using this flocking material. So it's kind of got a velvety texture to it. And then I was also sewing into this watercolor paper with these forms and trying to learn how to sew a little bit better with a machine. I normally sew by hand or stitch by hand. So this was kind of an experiment. I learned something. I mean, every experiment, the great thing about it is you learn something from it. And you take what you learn and you put it into the next piece. So none of it's, a lost cause. I got something out of
it. Do you have any of your hand-sewn works on view in your studio?
I actually don't. Oops. I have something, I have creepy things. So
that's great. Let's see some creepy things.
I collect my hair. So here is a bin of my hair that I've collected. So it's just all together right here. And this is from 2019. So 2019 hair. And I've written that on the front, so I'll remember. And so the hair goes from that point, and then it gets sorted, and I put it on a sheet of paper, and I've sorted long strands. And then I'm using small needles. That's hard to see, like that one. And since I started going gray, as you can see from here, I'm now sorting gray hair. So here is my gray hair that has been sorted, and it's ready for someone to work with, me, obviously. So there's that. I do have, by chance, have a drawing I started when I was first starting to work with canvas, and I rejected this one. So there you go. But so there you go. That's the beginning of it. So I stopped working with it, and I just put it away. It was too static for me. So to me, hair has a life of its own. It's kind of tangling, and it curls up, and it's wispy and moving. And the way I'd sewn it here, to me, was too static. And so it was a hair failure, if you will.
Interesting. So yeah, it almost seems like if it acts too much like embroidery thread, then it's deviating, then you don't want it. Like, that's not why you're choosing this material.
Right. So I like the life that it's inherent in hair itself. And, I want that feeling of the hair kind of snaking towards the viewer, coming off of the surface. And so in this piece, it didn't happen. So I just put it away, went on to something else. Here's something interesting. So I also do wall drawing installations, and sometimes I create the wall drawing installations. I go directly to the gallery and use Conte and draw directly on the wall. One piece I did was 25 feet long by 9 to 10 feet high. So they're very large. Sometimes I can't quite finish it in the time frame I'm being given by the gallery. So I do some prep work in order for me to do them a little bit faster. So one thing I figured out is I could take my hair drawings and send them off to a company and have them printed on fabric. And then I could take and cut out pieces from the fabric, adhere them to like a vinyl applique, and put that on the wall, so that some of the drawing might be done directly on the wall, and then some of it is pre-prepared before I get to the gallery, just to make the process go a little bit faster. So it's taking my work and using my own work and recycling it in a different way, giving it a new life.
Yeah, it sounds like that plays with the materiality too. Since there's that coming off the wall with the hair, with the individual strands, and then a sort of coming off the wall in the applique also.
Right. Yeah. So And then I've taken my watercolors and done a similar thing. So I will have them printed and make little vinyl appliques. So this is a watercolor, and it's actually a sticker. So it peels off and you can put it directly on the wall. I won't peel it off right now, but, and I use these in an installation in Durango, Colorado. And so they're abstract breast forms. And there was an interactive component to the exhibit that the viewer, there is a book there, and the show is about gender-based burdens. And you were supposed to write about your own experience with a gender-based burden, or how you think that you could help or alleviate or in some way help other women or make suggestions. And you didn't have to leave your real name. You were supposed to leave the name of a female artist as your sign-in. And then after you did that, you took one of these off the wall and you took it home with you. And so you got a small piece of artwork for participating.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I guess the vinyl applique, you did have in Jane Anger in February 2019, you did have the vinyl floor applique.
Right.
These
And that
boots
was my first time to do a floor.
Okay.
But it worked out well. And that was audience participation too, because I wanted people to walk on it.
And can you just tell us, for anyone who didn't see that work, can you just tell us what was depicted in the applique?
Sure. It was a piece called These Boots Are Gonna Walk All Over You, which is from a song, Nancy Sinatra. And on the wall were 25 11 by 15 watercolors with thread. And then on the floor were the same faces, but in a grid formation in this vinyl applique that adhered to the floor. And the images depicted men who had been, who were part of the U2 movement, who had been accused of sexual impropriety. And several of the men that I depicted were men who, after being accused, actually later on came out and said, yeah, I did do it. And so, so they're depicted, but their faces are very abstract. Some of their features are kind of smeared and or removed or morphed into something else. And the idea was for viewers who came in to walk across their faces that was on the floor. And so their sexual advances or sexual assaults were part of disrespecting women. It's as if somebody just walked all over you and didn't hear when you said no. And so this was the reverse, and we were walking on them.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful, way for art to function as that kind of reversal. It was a powerful piece in the exhibition, in a powerful exhibition. So yeah, it was really something.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess it seems like so much of your work has this sort of reversal, or a change from a static to more dimensional, more dynamic version of a figure. So much of your work is figurative.
Right.
I know there's a figure. Is that something recent that you're working on?
It's very recent. So I'm going to take you closer. How about that?
Great.
So I'm starting a series that's about marching. And so I'm interested, you mentioned that last series, which was Jane Anger, and that show. So this is kind of coming out of that series. So there's some details of the work. So it is hand-sewn human hair. And there are appliques on the piece. And then the method to install it is bra straps.
Brilliant.
And then there's some more details of the hair. So I wanted to, going from Jane Anger, I was thinking about anger and the idea of agency. And when you're very angry about something, what propels you to go out and protest? And I was certainly thinking about the women's marches, but also thinking about just the history of protest and women's involvement in protest. And if you think about the Women's March from 2017, is that right? Yeah, there's been 3. They had said that that was like the most women, greatest numbers that had ever marched. So I was like, well, why now? And how many participated in past marches? And so part of my artwork is working within a series, but also researching that topic. So I've been researching the idea of the marches. We know that the one in 2017 happened right after the inauguration for President Trump. And in my research, I found out don't quote me on this because I don't have the dates memorized. I think it was 1913 or 1903. It's Woodrow Wilson. And they marched right before his inauguration. So I didn't know that. And so part of the series is me also just researching that idea of these protests, when they happened, how many people participated in it, what sparked the protest, and also what happened. Did something change? You know, the idea is you're walking for change, but did something change? What came out of it? And oddly enough, the whole series is sparked by, there's a song by Beyonce called Formation. And the refrain in it is, okay, ladies, now let's get in formation. And I think of it as, okay, ladies, now let's be politically active. Let's get in formation. Let's get ready. Let's have some agency and participate in what's happening in the world. And so that's kind of what started this idea of the marching. So I want to do 2 more pieces that are the same size. This is 60 inches high by 33 inches, so that there's 3 of them going across. And then I'm going to work on a hair drawing with these figures. And towards that end, I've been doing I do a lot of sketching before I commit to what I'm going to do. So trying to figure out how I want the figures to look. I want it to have a sense of movement, and for me, that's kind of the challenge of it. And so I'm really focusing on the bottom half of the figure. I'm not giving them faces. It's not so much about identity in terms of formation and marching. I think the identity is the entire group versus one single person in that group or in that movement. You know, really focusing on the power of the group itself, propelling forward some message or a protest. And so that's why I'm not focusing on faces for this one. In the same series, I do have a series of faces. They're in a gallery right now, but they're faces of women politicians in the throes of anger. And so I've done Elizabeth Warren, AOC, Kamala Harris so far. And so that's part of the same series, this idea of, I think that the first march, the result of it, or the positive, is that it resulted in more women running for office. So there was more political activity on the part of women in trying to seek different positions, whether it was locally, regionally, or nationally.
Hmm.
When I work in my watercolors and work with my figures, I plot out the values that I'm using. And so in one painting, I jot down everything I've used.
Hmm.
So that I know kind of where it's going, what I've already used, what I like, what I didn't like in it. This was from I did a wall drawing, and the wall drawing was these two women that were holding hands. I had the idea of incorporating the stencil, and then, nah. But it was a thought. It was just a thought. There's the original photos for that wall drawing. So I started with some photos of me and a friend. And I did a series with guns. So there's some sketches from that. And then my sketches for my current series. I found a gray hair experiment to show you.
Oh, cool. And so in that very light value there, is that paint?
No,
Oh, no, that's hair?
it's Mylar, and I did brown hair into the Mylar. I was thinking of doing gray hair and brown hair in the same piece. So that was a thought. So I did a series about gender-based burdens, things that impact women, inequity in labor, violence, poverty. And so here's a sketch for when I started the series. And I thought they would have these burdens on their head. And the burden, I decided I didn't want it to be literal. So something that says poverty or something that says domestic violence or whatever. And so I ended up with more pieces like this. So the formation is a rock formation that's here in New Mexico at the Beasteye Badlands. It's a hiking area with these rock formations that look like they're from another world. And so I used those rock formations to symbolize or be a metaphor for the gender-based burdens that the women were holding on their head. And it's watercolor, plus it had hand-sewn human hair.
I guess, is there anything else that I can prompt you to discuss? Anything, anything that you just would love to share?
You know, I also make, so I did the gender-based burden series and created these forms on top of the head. And then I also did spoken word, some poems and spoken word also on the same series. And I created a gender burden hat for myself to wear. Do you think I can go run and get it?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Not far. So I tried to be pretty fast.
Yeah, that was great.
That was my hat
Wow.
that I made. So I thought of like women carrying these burdens around, kind of like psychological burdens. So maybe you have domestic violence in your background. And so if you took all of those burdens from your past and you could give them a form, a color, a shape, a texture, and if you were to wear them on your head, what would it look like? And so this was mine that I made for myself. And I thought of it as more of almost like these bulbous forms that are kind of overwhelming and kind of weigh you down. But it's essentially your past experiences. Maybe you dealt with poverty, or maybe inequity in labor, something like that. And so this was kind of a way to give it a visual form. And so in my spoken word, for some of the poems, I wear my hat.
Well, I'm so glad that you did run and get that. It's so great to see it up close. I guess one of the things that I find so magical about that hat is that you take it off at the end.
Yeah. I mean, you can't carry everything forever. So it's a temporary thing. It's a hat. So it's not permanent. So I just wanted to mention that sometimes something 2D gets turned into something 3D. Something from the visual art side morphs and goes into the spoken word performance part.
Yeah, I think you've done a great job of showing us how there's this flow between those two. It's really that's conceptual, but has this formal language that changes so much from even from looking at art history and your research and inspirations, and
Yeah.
and then an engagement with the audience too, which is one of the things that I find so intriguing in your work. Just even your choices to use have the extended strands of hair in the work, when obviously they could be tucked away, but it's a very deliberate decision to have
Right.
them acting as hair and coming out at the viewer.
Right. Yeah. And I think, sometimes people have a hard time believing it's hair. So I had a piece at the Durango Art Center a couple years ago, and it was hanging on the wall, and I was watching two women look at it. And the one lady leaned over and she starts going, and she's blowing on the drawing from the side. And I was like, okay. And she was pointing to it and talking to her friend. So she was blowing on the hairs so they would move, so she could show her friend that it really was human hair, that it's not pencil marks or pen marks. And the movement to her was her proof. There you go, it really is hair. So it was just a funny thing to see.
And yeah, I guess we're getting a glimpse of what your next exhibitions will include. So
that is true. That is true. Of the series about marching, which will come to Amos Eno Gallery sometime in 2021.
Woo! Well, great. We'll have to let Beyonce know her role in this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Rosemary. I'm going to end the recording now.